Well, some really interesting points made by Hans Bert now, and he's touched upon quite a bit of it. I mean, one of the things that he kind of mentioned was the need to sort of faster to adapt, the speed to market, which is a pressure and it's a big driver at the moment at the back. I mean, a lot of OEMs are looking at it, and it's in one way it's a positive because it's creating the need for more innovation, more adaptability and flexibility. I think you mentioned earlier on was pretty key, but also kind of greater collaboration, and that's kind of a very sort of healthy place to be, bringing those teams in. And I mean, in the past, I think that companies have struggled with what they call tribal knowledge. So teams are very expert in certain areas, but they don't necessarily mix or share very much across the board. And I think that's now changing quite a bit. I mean, he mentioned there how the sort of digital tools are kind of like, you know, without the people buying into it, they're kind of just tools, essentially.
Right.
I just kind of wanted to bring in one example, if I may, that we had at the conference. We spoke to Trent Randalls at Borg Warner, who we worked with quite a lot over the years, and he set out a really interesting example of a kind of cross-functional team that if you had to kind of name it, you probably wouldn't put all these people together. But I think he had representatives. I think there's about 9 people in it, but they represented engineering, as you might well imagine, production, again, as you would imagine, probably design, product development, but also from safety and maintenance. And it was really, and he said the importance of having all of those people in there and sharing their thoughts was really key and really beneficial. And basically, I mean, this is a brilliant way of doing it. They've all got on you know, they shipped them all to one of the Borg Warner technical centers and put in front of them an existing, I think it was transfer cases they were working on. Put an existing one and a prototype one, and they all basically had to roll their sleeves up, get the spanners out and take it apart and reassemble it. And in doing that, they could see the difference physically see the difference between the old one and the new one. And on the new one, the product engineering, production, safety and maintenance teams could all kind of input to say where they might see challenges, where things could be better, be optimized, where new tooling might be needed. And he just said the benefits of that and having them. And he said that not only was it good on a sort of pragmatic level, it was good on a kind of team building, bonding. So everyone then was much more willing to share, to spend the time as well. I think he said, because everyone's time poor in these things. So he really kind of said this was a big thing. And I know we've spoken a lot with Trent at Borg Warner about various things, digital tools, digital twins, the move to EV componentry, and all the time Trent always kind of comes back to that collaborative cross-functional team, how important that's been for him. And the teams he works in South Carolina, Seneca. That's been massively important to them progressing those projects.
Most definitely. Yeah. And this, I mean, taps into we have been actually touching on uncovering the design for manufacture as an approach towards this. Earlier this year, I wrote a feature, if you remember, on why global automotive innovators need to embrace design for manufacture. And the implication, of course, is that the superior speed and efficiency of new market entrants, particularly from China, as we're seeing, are not fundamentally due to better robots or tech, which a lot of people may assume, but to a structural, cultural advantage. Now, of course, that's not to say that the techs and the robots and the automation aren't important. Of course they are, and we know a lot of the Chinese entrants are, you know, that they're really deep into it, and we can see it in their vehicles. But actually, it's the structural advantage that they have, which I think allows them to be so quick at you know, time to market. They've essentially fundamentally collapsed the traditional sequential automotive development process, and we're seeing that the single greatest challenge for legacy OEMs performing the aforementioned open heart surgery is competing with the agility of firms built on a clean slate. So the competitive edge is rooted mainly in rigorous design for manufacture and unparalleled speed. And while legacy OEMs operate on a 5 to 7 year major model cycle, firms like NIO are reportedly delivering new EV designs to market in approximately 120 weeks, which is half the time. We've also found that they achieve this through two key factors: vertical integration and digital first agility. Companies like BYD, they eliminate the contractual friction between design and production by manufacturing core components such as the blade battery internally. And this forces the vehicle design team to work concurrently with the battery production team, of course, and it streamlines the most complex and expensive components through DFM, and design for manufacture. And then when it comes to digital first agility, they tend to treat the vehicle as a unified digital product. And they embed manufacturing and software engineers into the design process from the earlier stages. And of course, this it avoids the cost traps that occur when manufacturability is considered too late. So a factor that can account for very high percentages. I mean, you know, there's some disagreement on this, but 70–80% of a product's eventual cost, according to some industry reports, you know, which is no small fries. So, I mean, the ultimate lesson here and what we're seeing is that to break down silos, I mean, the most agile manufacturing operations are those where collaboration isn't approached as a request, but it's a structural mandate. And we see that competing in the EV era requires legacy players to adopt the clean slate mindset. And I think that this is very important for, you know, Western, in air quotes, OEMs and car makers to adopt. So this should make simultaneous engineering the enforceable central pillar of vehicle production to achieve this unmatchable speed and cost efficiency, which we're seeing coming out of China.
Yeah, and I mean, and you mentioned NIO there, and I was talking to someone last week about this, and they were saying about exactly what you said. Because the Chinese are starting pretty much from a clean slate, they have this holistic, and it's such an advantage when it comes to looking at process and overlaying things, so you can remove certain iterations of what you've got to do without kind of damaging the final product. And I spoke to NIO a couple of years ago about simultaneous engineering, and this was a project with an integrator to build a line for electronic drive modules, and you know, their approach was that we need to get this done 3 months sooner, 5 months sooner than we would normally. So they just contracted the from design to actual production by a huge amount, by about a third, I think it was. And the teams were working with, I think it was Comau, who were building the line for them. And they said they didn't give them a finished product or a prototype to say, can you make a line to fix this? They said they brought them in right at the early design stage and gave them the CAD drawings and said, build us a line that goes with this. And this was even before, I understand, before financial contracts had been signed. So it kind of almost like was moving, obviously an element of trust with this, but they're long-time colleagues and partners. And both Comau and NIO had teams integrated very, very closely, so that Comau knew whenever NIO had made any design changes to any part of it, they knew about it, so they could adapt. So by the time they got to the point of a physical line and a physical component, it was perfectly matched, but in a, you know, 2/3 the time. So you see examples like that and you think, wow, that's as you say, that's kind of driving other OEMs who are not going to drastically change what they do, but it gives them other ideas about how they might approach it. So, and again, like the collaborative point of view, it just never seems to, you always seem to get that sort of sense of it, working with an integrator that closely and with that level of trust, and saying, okay, here's a CAD design, go away and fix it. So I think, you know, looking as you go forward, that, and you mentioned there that holistic approach, it's the way forward, I would say. We're looking at things. I mean, just moving forward, of course, ourselves, which we need to do for our reverie on that one. But I mean, being people centric as well. Those again, for me, and you mentioned some examples there. The NIO sort of come out thing with the embedded teams, right on point. That design for production, as you mentioned, we toyed with this about a year, 18 months ago. and we kind of getting a sense of it. And now when we talk to people, it's a very big deal. This much further upstream working. But also, like, how are companies kind of building that in? How are they working to get teams involved? One of the sort of areas which is quite challenging is when you've got disparate teams across a disparate network, with each project has its own focus. How do you kind of start to bring that together? And that kind of brings, I just wanted to bring on another video. So we spoke to Murugan Bhuminathan, who's a senior analyst for manufacturing solutions at Magna IT. And he was joining us, and he was talking about, one of his roles was to kind of make this connection across different teams, across different sites and facilities, and make the most of the right tools, the right process, the right mindset. So we've got a short video. We did a quick interview with him. So we can just play the video with Murugan. That'd be great.
Just want to pick up on a few of the conversations we've had on the stage, just taking it a little bit further. I mean, looking at how Magna operates, what are the strategies that you've employed to overcome like cultural or bureaucratic hurdles that often arise when you're trying to implement new technologies and processes across multiple, so you're dealing with multiple facilities as well. I mean, is it something you come across, and kind of how do you manage that?
Yeah, this is always the case, right? When we try to introduce new things, especially with things that is not introduced in the past, or the operation doesn't have any experience, they always come back and say, hey, I do have one thing that I'm doing today, what it's going to change tomorrow, right? The best way is to introduce the change slowly and in a constant pace. In other words, we have to do a small POC with the engaging team from the floor, try to engage them at the early stage so that they get experience with the tool, compare what the solution they have, how they are going to adapt the new one. So that way we lay down a path for them to adapt the change slowly and in a constant pace. That's the one thing. And then we also work with the other group leaderships to making sure adapting the change from one place to another, and then we can scale them in a effective way.
Yeah, I mean, another big sort of aspect of kind of this changing kind of workforce culture are cross-functional teams. We've spoken a lot about it at the event over the last couple of days. They sound great. There are some in operation at the minute, some more successful than others. I just wondered, what were the kind of, how do you kind of work across larger networks when you've got numerous small units that are very focused on particular tasks, and how do you ensure that you're getting an effective outcome from like a cross-functional team in that respect?
Yeah, this is a great question, because Magna as a company have several product lines which follow different processes at the floor. In that case, we always go and start with the process. What's the process which is going to drive the product line as an output? So we find all the processes first and accumulate them. Either we group them as a separate entity and make solutions for the processes, as opposed to, okay, you have some solution that you can take and deploy and use whatever the way you like to use it, right? Rather, okay, this is your process. For example, it could be a sequencing or batching. You identify the process and deploy the solution. This is one aspect. And then engaging the cross-functional team is another aspect. For example, the process can differ from materials to quality to production to shipping, right? All needs to be identified in early stage so we can deploy a right template for the need for the customers. So that it's very important to identify process as well as which skill team is going to take which processes.
Yeah.